Before we argue about the world, let's pause and ask a better question. For decades, millions of people have risked everything to reach the West. They cross deserts, they cross oceans, they leave behind families, cultures, and homes, not because they want to, but because they feel they have no other choice. And yet the conversation we keep having is about the movement itself, about the numbers, about the arrivals, about the strain on systems and the pressure on borders. We talk endlessly about the wave, and almost never about what created it. And before we argue about borders, or laws, or politics, we need to ask a deeper question. Why are so many people forced to leave home in the first place? That question makes people uncomfortable, because the answer requires us to look at systems, not just at people. And systems are harder to argue with than strangers at a border. Migration is often treated as the problem. It dominates headlines, it shapes elections, it fills hours of political debate, and somewhere in all of that noise, the actual question gets buried. But migration is a symptom, and treating a symptom without addressing the cause doesn't solve anything. It just moves the suffering somewhere less visible. The real causes are quieter and harder to confront. Economic collapse, lack of opportunity, corruption, weak institutions, and governments that fail to protect or provide for their people, not because those people don't matter, but because the systems around them were never designed with them in mind. When people can't find work, can't access education, can't trust their leaders, can't imagine a future, leaving becomes an act of survival. Not ambition, not preference, survival. And no border policy in history has ever stopped people from trying to survive. So what if we stopped asking only, how do we manage migration? And instead asked, how do we reduce the need for it? Those are very different questions. One focuses on control, the other focuses on cause. One builds walls, the other builds futures. And only one of them actually gets to the root of the problem. This isn't about open borders, and it isn't about ignoring laws. It isn't about erasing the complexity of what nations face when people arrive in large numbers. It's about creating a world where migration is a choice, not a necessity. A world where people can thrive without having to abandon home, where the decision to leave comes from curiosity and ambition, not desperation. That world is possible, but it requires asking better questions than the ones we've been asking. What if the West and the United Nations worked together, not just to respond to migration, but to address its root causes? Imagine a UN-led audit of countries of origin, not to punish, not to shame, but to understand. An honest evaluation of governance, economic policies, human rights, and institutional strength, not behind closed doors, but with transparency, accountability, and genuine global support. Because the countries people are leaving are not beyond saving. Most of them have resources. Most of them have people who want to stay, who would stay, if staying were a viable option. What they often lack is not potential. It's support, it's investment, it's the kind of sustained international attention that doesn't arrive only after a crisis, but builds the conditions that prevent one. Global responsibility means more than processing arrivals at a border. It means asking what created the journey and what could have prevented it. Real change doesn't begin at borders. It begins with opportunity. Economic partnerships that create real jobs, not extractive arrangements that take more than they give. Investments that strengthen local businesses and keep wealth circulating within the communities that generate it. Infrastructure that connects people, roads that reach rural areas, schools that are funded and staffed, healthcare that doesn't require traveling half a day to access, education and vocational training that prepare people for meaningful work, not charity, not dependency, a genuine transfer of tools and knowledge that allows communities to build on their own terms. Fair trade practices that allow countries to grow, not just extract value from them, Because a country that can sell what it produces at a fair price doesn't need aid, it needs access. When people can build a future at home, fewer feel forced to leave. It's not a complicated equation, it just requires the will to act on it. Behind every migration statistic is a human story. A parent trying to provide for children who are watching and learning what the world values. A young person searching for dignity, not wealth, not luxury, just the basic experience of being treated as if their life matters. A family hoping for safety, not adventure. Safety, the kind that most people in stable countries never have to think about because it has always simply been there. If leaders truly saw this suffering, not as a statistic, not as a political issue, but as a human reality, and knew the world was watching, pressure to act would grow. Accountability changes priorities, and changed priorities change outcomes. We have seen it before. When the world pays attention, things shift. Slowly, imperfectly, but they shift. Attention is not nothing. Attention is the beginning of every change that has ever happened. So what if we focused less on managing migration flows and more on reducing the forces that drive them? What if global responsibility meant helping countries succeed, not just controlling who leaves them? What if we measured the success of international policy not by how many people were turned away, but by how many people no longer felt they had to leave? And what if creating opportunity became the most effective border policy of all? Not walls, not deterrence, not more processing centers at the edges of wealthier nations, but investment, cooperation, and the long, unglamorous work of building conditions where people can stay and choose to. Peace on earth is not a dream, it's a decision to look deeper, to act earlier, to stop responding to crises that could have been prevented and start preventing them. A decision to value human dignity not only when it arrives at our door, but before it ever has to make the journey. Because when people can thrive at home, the world becomes more stable for everyone, not just for the countries receiving migrants, for all of us. Stability doesn't stop at borders, neither does instability. We are connected whether we choose to be or not. The only question is whether we use that connection to build something or simply to manage the damage. And the truth is, we already know what works. Opportunity works, dignity works, cooperation works. We have seen it, we have built it before. The knowledge exists. What has been missing is the collective will to apply it everywhere, not just where it's convenient. So let this be the generation that stops measuring strength by how many people it turns away, and starts measuring it by how many people never had to leave in the first place. And every decision begins with a question.